a view from what you're going to be seeing.
Okay, so we're going to go through all of the flight modes for the precision, and this is how I set up all of my models anyway. But so looking at the transmitter, everything's pretty straightforward. It's a mode 2, so ailerons, elevator, rudder, flaps. You're used to that, right? Okay, so the main flight mode switch is right here. So it's launch, cruise, speed.
Okay.
Okay. Independent of those 3 main flight modes is this switch back here for thermal. This switch back here for thermal basically overrides all other flight modes except for landing mode. Okay. That means if this is on, if thermal mode is on, this switch doesn't work.
Okay.
If that switch doesn't work, check that switch. Make sure it's off, then you have access to all the other flight modes.
Okay.
Okay. Once I get through all the switches with you, I'll show you where it is on the screen, and it'll make more sense how things work, and then allow you to fix it or change it if you want. So that's thermal mode. The reason I put thermal mode there is because when you're switching from any mode into thermal mode, it's the most relaxed point in the flight. So you're in cruise mode, you're doing your thing, you've launched, you go up the line, you're full tension, you push down, dive down the line, and pull up, and you wait, push over the top, and then you just pull it into thermal mode, and then you can switch into cruise for when you get out of thermal mode.
Okay.
So this is one of the modes that I just found was the easiest one to put out there by itself because it was the most relaxed time you're going to have in the flight to select it, and it overrides everything.
Okay.
So that's why it's out there by itself. But to have this switch all by itself, where you go from launch to speed all in one motion, so you can do that dive down the top and pull up, and then click right into cruise if you want to cruise off of there, or while you're in speed, when you roll off the top, you just click it right into thermal mode and float. So you just need to make sure that when you do come back to whatever mode you want to be flying in, just roll through the switches, make sure they're in the right place for you. Speed, launch, cruise. Okay. So away is speed, straight up in the middle is cruise, towards you is launch. This switch here is a modifier of those flight modes. If you're in launch, that's launch mode A, launch mode B, and launch mode C. B and C are no different, and don't worry about them. If I were you, I use launch mode A out of your hand to get the quick rotation, but if you left it there, it would be squirrely and have too much up elevator. So as soon as it rotates, I pop down into B, and then it locks in and goes real smooth. If I were you, for starting out, I would just leave it in B and launch in B until you get really comfortable with it, and then go ahead and start in A, have it rotate fast, and then click into B on the way up. That just means you have to be prepared. So when you're flying the airplane, you basically just launch, it goes, you make one little correction, and then bam, you're right into mode B. And then you're just flying it up the line. The model is set up so that you don't have to fly the elevator up the line. At the most you'll have to do when it comes out of a person's hands is you'll have to bump it, just to set it in case it's starting to over-rotate. And literally it's just a bump, and it goes and sets, and off it goes. And you shouldn't touch the elevator at all until you get to the top, dive, pull up. Okay?
It sounds so easy.
It's practice, 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 practice. And if you can sit and visualize that, I mean, the timing is launch, set, B, all the way up, you're just guiding it, get to the top, push, pull, glide, push, thermal mode.
Wow.
And it just did all of that, right?
Yeah.
And roughly that speed. Everything's set up so it glides really good, and it's controlled really nicely. It's not overly sensitive, but it's definitely crisp. Okay, so flying it up the slope and getting used to how it flies is probably a good idea. But it's so clean and set up so good for the different flight modes. Flight modes are based on airspeed and what you're trying to do. So when you're in thermal mode, you have a lot of rudder mix, you have a lot of differential, because it's going so slow that the aerodynamic forces are such that you need all of those throws to have a nice coordinated turn. As you get going faster, you can be in cruise, slow cruise, medium cruise, and fast cruise. And all those do is change your aileron to rudder mix. See that? Slow cruise, medium cruise, fast cruise. And it also changes the amount of down trim and maybe the amount of reflex. Yeah, see, slow cruise has a little bit of regular camber. Regular cruise is a little less. Fast cruise, just a click of down trim. All of the trims are independent. So if you are in fast cruise and you want it to slow down, or you think it's going too fast or it's tucking, you can add a couple of clicks of trim in that mode and it'll remember it.
Okay.
You come back into normal cruise and you like it, you don't touch it. Slow cruise, if you want it to speed up a little bit or slow down, add some trim.
That's what I
and it'll
set up
yep,
as well.
and it'll set just like that. Same thing with all these modes. So if you're in reflex and it does anything but straight as an arrow, if you're diving it straight down and it does, if it tucks or does anything like that, you keep trimming it until it goes straight as an arrow. And pull up and try it at 45, it should go straight as an arrow. Pull up really fast and let off the stick, it should go straight as an arrow level at that speed. If it doesn't, a click or two of up or down, and make sure it's straight.
Okay.
That's the key to success for any F3B pilot. If the airplane flies straight by itself, half the workload is taken care of. We're not holding pressures on the stick to make sure it goes straight. It's trimmed.
Okay.
Okay. So real quick, we'll run through it again. All the flight modes go like this. Launch, A, B, and C. There is no C programmed right now, but there would be if you wanted one there. Cruise, fast cruise, medium cruise, slow cruise. Speed, there's only one speed. This does nothing. Thermal mode, there's only one thermal mode, although there can be a float mode added to this switch. This does nothing. And then finally, landing mode. No matter what these switches positions are in, when you pull this stick past a certain point, it clicks into landing mode. That means you get your mixes. So from speed, you can see how much, I don't have any rudder mix at all. When I click into landing mode, boom, there it goes. I get all my throws back and I'm in landing mode. It's about at the 20% stick travel range, and you can set that up. So now what I'm going to do
Now,
is
if you're going down fast and you pull those flaps, it won't hurt it.
don't do that. If you pull flaps going really, really fast, you could burn a servo out.
Okay.
Pull the flaps when you're slow.
Okay.
If you need to relaunch or anything like that, guys that dive fully loaded and get down to the ground hauling ass and pull their flaps are just asking to smoke the servo.
All right. I was watching
So-
you guys do that, and it's like,
No, the first thing you do is when you're coming down, you pull the flaps at the top where you're slow.
gotcha.
And you dive down at full flaps. But you
Okay.
don't open the flaps when you're fast.
Okay. Gotcha.
And if you do dive in fast, I dive in all the way, like if I'm coming out from a distance round that I want to reflight, I'll dive as fast as I can to get back in a hurry, and I'll get here and I'll pull up, and as I get up and kill my airspeed at the top, I'll pull the flaps and dive down
Got it.
with full flap.
Got it.
But you want to keep as much load off the flaps as you can, especially when you're loaded.
Okay.
I mean, all these linkages are internal, and there's no mechanical advantage. So the aero forces back to the servo are pretty high.
Okay.
Yeah, full flaps when you're slow, and then you can keep them out, and then you can go as fast as you can when you're at full flaps, but it won't it won't
Okay.
hit the servo because it won't speed up.
Okay.
Right. That's a good question, by the way.
I don't want to break it.
Just letting the magic.
I've had two bad ones. So.
Letting the magic smoke out of the servos are a bad thing. So
Good.
just keep in mind that aero loads do count, and flaps are the biggest smoker of servos. And if you can keep the airplane when you go to full flaps, if you do that when the airplane's slow, you're going to get way more life out of your servos.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to run through the menu really quick and show you where the flight mode setup is for all this stuff.
Okay.
If you haven't been through it on a DX18 or a DX9 before, it's
I've got an 8.
you've got an 8. So
Yeah.
this is different, a little
Completely
bit different.
different, right.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to go into system setup, and we're going to go to flight mode setup. So the very first screen is the switches where you choose which switch is what. So switch 1, I have switch B, which is that one, primary flight mode. Switch 2 is switch C, which is this one. I call that the flight mode modifier. So different launch settings and different cruise settings. Okay. But launch and cruise are all set from here. Flight mode, or switch 3 is switch A. That's the switch that gets me into thermal mode and out of thermal mode. And the priority switch is set to the throttle stick. Right here. Okay. Enabled flight modes 9. I've got 9 enabled flight modes. Going to the next screen, you roll down to the next and hit go. This is the priority switch. That tells you what this priority switch is set to do. In position 0, it's set to switches. So it's in your rig. It doesn't take over. As soon as you get to position 1, it switches into landing mode A, and position 2 is still landing mode A. I only have one landing mode. You can see down here when it switches. So there I'm in speed. Right about there is when it hits and goes into position 1. Those position locations are adjustable in the analog switch setup in another screen on the transmitter.
Okay.
I can show you that. So we go past this one. In this table, this is the flight mode table. So this are your switches, B, C, and A, 1, 2, and 3, and this is the positions that they're currently in. If you scroll down, so when you get to this menu, your cursor's up here on the list. If you just roll it once, that drops the cursor down into the fields. And these fields, there's two groups of 9. There's 9 there and 9 there. This switch here is switch 3, which is switch A. That skips the cursor from the left field to the right field. Notice that all of the fields in the right field are thermal.
Okay.
That means that no matter what these switches do,
Still in thermal.
it's always in thermal. That's why this overrides everything.
Okay.
If you didn't want it to override everything, you could assign the exact same names in the rest of these switches, so that all these switches had to be in the perfect position for that to be thermal.
Okay.
I thought, no, I don't want that. When I pull this switch, I want it to be in thermal regardless of where all the other switches are. Okay, much easier to remember. So you can see that this switch here, switch A, causes the cursor to look in fields in the vertical direction. So pulling it towards you goes to the bottom field, middle is in the middle, and top is on top. Notice that all three across the top are speed, because if I use the modifier switch, switch B, actually it's switch C, but it's switch number 2 in the previous screen, it moves the cursor horizontally across those fields. Right? So no matter what I do with this, it's still in speed mode. Right? But if I go down one, now I have availability of selecting slow cruise, normal cruise, and fast cruise. Like that.
Got it.
Pull it toward me and launch. Now I can select launch A, B, and C. Okay? So real quick, what you do to get these guys changed, I'm going to go over here to thermal. And I'm going to click on it. Now it's blinking. Now that the cursor is blinking, you can go through and select what you want in that field based on the stick position that you like. Right? So I can go through here and just scroll through all the different flight modes that I have named in this transmitter and pick the one that I want. See down here in bold?
Mm-hmm.
That's telling me the full spell out of that short one up there. So I can just keep going until I find the one I want, and I'll put it back in thermal. And leave it there. So that's how you set all of these.
Okay.
If I go back to, so that's the last screen. If I go back to previous, and then previous again, and then one last time, previous. This is the flight mode wizard, which I don't suggest you ever do. What we were looking at was the custom flight mode setup. The wizard is kind of gives you handcuffs. You think it makes it easier, but it gives you less choices.
Okay. I'm not going to screw it up.
No, you should learn it.
Said by the master.
You should definitely learn it. Flight mode name setup, back to the system screen. So this is the main system screen when you hold the button down and turn the transmitter on. Mm-hmm. You go down here to flight mode name setup. Wherever it went. There. Now these are, you can name these however you want. And I went through and just named them because it doesn't matter what the name is so long as you can find it in the list when you're assigning it to the fields in that screen we just saw. So this is where I named all of my flight modes. I have one called float, but I don't have it assigned anywhere. That is the second thermal. If you wanted to have it set up, I would have a second thermal on there. And all that means is you just basically you're flying straight, not thermaling, not circling. You're just trying to keep it up for as long as you can. But thermal mode in this airplane does that just fine.
Okay.
No reason to change. Okay, so flight mode names is how you name all those things. By the way, you're getting an instruction book.
Okay.
So when you go back to the main screen, when this lit up, it's transmitting RF. When it's not transmitting RF, the other way to access the system menu is just to push the roller. Mm-hmm. scroll all the way down to system setup,
Yeah.
push that. Yep, it asks you if you want to do that. You say yes.
Yeah.
The light goes out. It's not transmitting RF anymore. Okay, and another quick way to change airplanes, both of these buttons at the same time takes you into the airplane selection mode, and you can switch airplanes and hit go and then main menu and you're back. Okay, so that's basically the operation of the transmitter, and I highly recommend that you sit and play with it for a while and visualize flying. The models are set up and CG'd perfectly. Anything you do with the trims will be felt. If you add a little click of up trim in one of the modes or other, you'll feel it. It's very fine. I think the increment is set to 1 on this. So 2 or 3 clicks, 4 clicks, you'll start to see it really happening. But the very subtle changes happening at 1 click at a time.
Wow, okay.
They're pretty precise servos. There's no double center on any of the surfaces. So I think it's going to be a point and shoot, real easy way for you to get started.
Awesome.
Both of these models are set up exactly the same way with flight modes.
Okay.
And they're both trimmed per the gator. So I think you'll find that everything's really rocking, ready to go. This one's all equipped with the Spektrum digital servos. That one's all equipped with Spektrum in the fuselage and JR in the wings.
Okay.
These are sealed into the wings, so it's an RDS built into the wings. If a servo dies, you got to surgically remove it. It can happen. You can do it, but you have to surgically remove it.
Okay.
And these have the hatches on the back, on the bottom, and you can just unscrew one and pull it out.
Okay.
They're the
When you're landing, pop the flaps up.
always.
Okay.
The flaps touch.
Yeah, okay.
See that? So if you leave the flaps down, you're going to break a servo out.
Sure.
So you just get it nice and slow, 6 inches off the ground, close the flaps and let it flop.
Sure.
Got it? So I just I'm about that high off the ground, it's nice and slow, and then I bam. For last thing I do before it hits the ground is close the flaps. Any questions about it?
I'm sure I'll have some.